Welcome back to the Rush Hour Podcast. I'm TW. This is Justin. We're two non technical tech workers. We've been in the industry for 30 plus years from Amazon, Twitch, Discord, Zynga. We've seen it all from IPOs to acqui-hires to, frankly, closing up shop. So, we've been a part of it. We've started things on our own. We've done side hustles. We've got a ton of experience that we're just down to share. We say we're spitting free game here. So join the ride. And we'll talk, topical things. The first topic today is having, how do we want to say this? Kids in tech, parenting in tech,
kids in tech.
parenting. Yeah, this is a topic that Justin and I talk about all the time because we're both fairly new parents. I've got a 7 and 10-year-old. I mean, you tell them about.
Yeah, I got 4.5-year-old twin girls, pandemic babies. 2020 kids. So it's definitely been a ride. I know for everyone out there, it's been challenging, but I think it's particularly interesting to talk about what is the impact of having kids on and being in a tech job and kind of living in this Silicon Valley, living and working in this Silicon Valley ecosystem. So we just wanted to talk a bit about our experience, hopefully provide some insight and maybe some funny or interesting stories as well.
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people have reached out to me personally and been like, "Hey, what's it like? Being a parent, having a kid, and balancing your sort of work life and your personal life. We all have sort of intricacies that we deal with, as far as like interests and marriage and family and all of that. Like, how does that all balance when you have to balance, kind of startup life, which is often thought of as like all encompassing, with family and with young toddlers, which also seems all encompassing. How does that work? How does that play out? And you know, I can start or you can start. How do you want to jump in, Justin?
Yeah, I thought maybe what we could do is do a bit of pros and cons. That might be kind of fun, right? So,
Sure.
like, what are some of the pros
Yes.
of being a parent and being in tech, and then cons? And maybe I could start with the pros. One of the things that's cool about tech industry, and again, it's scary hours right now. The industry is not what it was before, but I still think there are some benefits if people are thinking about exploring a career in tech or see if it resonates with them if they are currently in it. So I think the first part is flexibility. And now that may seem somewhat counterintuitive to like an all-encompassing, startup, tech environment where people are grinding and it's a dark room with the hoodies on and coding all the time. Now we're not technical people, but that's kind of like the vibe and the culture. But I think where the flexibility comes in is, and I've seen this kind of across the board. I want to get your perspective on it too, Tito. Is like if you get your stuff done and you're generally available during the day, then you can work. You don't have to work the same like kind of 9 to 5 hours as you would think in a traditional job. It's more about, hey, the team has certain goals, you get them accomplished, then you can, if you have to log in, if you're working 8 to 4 and they got to log in at 8 after you put the kids down for another few hours, that's fine as long as you're accomplishing stuff. So I feel like the flexibility piece, especially for me, being a father of two kids, has been nice to just feel like I can still get everything done during the day and not feel like, I was kind of bucking the trend of other people who I worked with or in the industry. So definitely the flexibility of work hours has been a great pro.
Yeah, I agree. And we're all in sort of different places in our careers. I think everybody that's probably listening also, right? Everyone's in kind of in a different place when you embark on this journey. Sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not. You kind of deal with the sort of hand you're dealt. But for me, I think about it like you there's a forcing function with having a kid and balancing of your schedule that you have to be more efficient, whereas
Mm-hmm.
in the past, and Justin, you can agree or not, but when you're younger you can kind of waste more time doing certain tasks and there's really no effect on you. You can just work a little longer at night. If you're inefficient during the day, you can say, I'm just going to catch up later. and sort of spend more time on it to clean it up, whether that's a deck or putting thought into some PRD or whatever it is, emails, responses. You put a little more time into it later, you catch up. Whereas when you have a kid, it's much harder, right? Because your time has to be efficient. You need to really think about what's important both to you on a professional level and on a personal level, right? You can't keep dipping into the well of like I'm going to take away time from my personal to work on work. Now it's like a forcing function of balancing the two, which for me has become beneficial because I used to always just be like, oh, you know what? I'll just do a little more extra work and figure it out. But now it's like, hey, you get into a room and you hear things, to do lists and all that, and you, in your mind you're already starting to prioritize these things like that. I'm not doing that because I don't have time for that. And I think it really helps, like as a human being and as a business person, when you have that, right? When you have the urgency behind you, I think that's a pro. Like even for me, just thinking about like my schedule and my time, I'm a lot more detail oriented with it now than I was before kids, right? Like I think about like how important is this? How is this going to help me get my job done? What's the ultimate impact of doing this? Versus in the past, I probably would have just been like, whatever. I'm not. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to do it because in
Yeah.
case it comes in handy, I don't need to do that sort of analysis. And I think that's really helpful. That's a huge pro for me. Would you like? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, as you were talking about it, I thought about another time that like was not necessarily related to kids, but where I had to kind of really grind and focus, and the fact that I had less time made it seem, made it so that I really had to focus during the time that I had was like when I was working on my thesis in college, and so I didn't have as much like in that time, spring semester leading up to graduation. I didn't have as much time to kind of do as much stuff with friends, and this was something that I had chosen to do as part of like a more intellectual exercise to have some like major contribution before graduating. But it's like, hey, when you have to be very very efficient and thoughtful, and things are a bit more regimented, then um, it can unlock a superpower in some ways as well of how you spend that time. So I definitely think that with kids, you definitely unlock a superpower of time management, and that's definitely something that I've been able to appreciate in this environment.
Yeah. No, the other pro with tech is you can tell by what we're wearing clothing wise.
Oh yeah.
We you, it's not a formal place of it. I think I was watching Suits last night with my wife, and I was like, man, I'm so glad I don't imagine getting up every morning and having to put on a suit, and then head out the door. It just the thought of that, like,
I know, bro.
going to pick up kids and being comfortable, it just like saves you the time every day of just wearing what's comfortable and you go and do your thing.
I think the people at
Huge
my
piece of
kids,
flexibility.
yeah, I think the people at my kids' school may think I'm like maybe a bum a bit because I'll pick them up so many days and some joggers and Crocs. They're probably like, "Who is this guy?" And other people are within tech, but like I live in Oakland, and it's a bit more heterogeneity in terms of the type of jobs. You got school teachers, and people who work with
Yes.
their hand, blue collar job, whatever, and they're seeing me. Or people work in banking and other jobs, and then they're like seeing me, and I got like hoodies on every day and Crocs, and I'm just
Yes.
that's just like my uniform, and it's definitely uh, that piece. It's definitely like a peace of mind thing, right? Like some people take it to another extreme. I have a friend who literally just wears black shirts every day. He's like a real tech guy. He's like, I'm not even going to think about that. My uniform is just kind of black shirt, but it does help to kind of like focus more on the work where you don't have to put on airs as much, right? I think like kind of what you're talking about is like, what do we do to kind of showcase or demonstrate that we have certain intellectual capability or that we should be taken seriously? And I think in the
Right.
space, it's more about ideas and less about your appearance and what you're wearing, because that has nothing to do with like kind of the value of your ideas. And it's definitely something I've taken for granted. Having been in the space this long now, I think of like, oh, I have to present myself or look a certain way. I don't really think about that as
Yes.
much. Obviously, you want to look kept. You don't want to be wearing
Yeah.
clothes that don't look like you left the house in a number of days.
You don't want
Uh,
this.
No, but that's, I mean, that, I like that.
But yeah,
That
no,
clip it. Um, but yeah, just being able to kind of like focus on the work a bit more and not on the appearance is definitely another benefit with everything else you have going on as a
yeah, I
parent.
agree. That's a good one because that is something we take for granted. The tech, because so many engineers kind of push the limits of like, hey, I work whenever, I do whatever, I come in flip flops, but I get stuff done, and that sort of permeates throughout the culture of the company because a lot of these tech companies are started by by an engineer, or at least has a founding team member that's an engineer, and they very quickly learn it is not about what you wear to work and how you're presented, in terms of the value to the company. So like that gets thrown out the window immediately. It's like, hey, wear what you want, do what you want, just get stuff done. And I think that is something, that's really nice, and helps as a if you're a parent, you can appreciate, hey, some days you don't have a lot of time. You're up late. Kid was sick, whatever it may be. Maybe you were a little more disheveled than normal, but you
Yeah,
still show up and you still perform, and it's pretty neat, when you think about it that way.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I was thinking like while you're talking like what another pro might be, and I wonder if you agree with this. Maybe this will be a point where we don't necessarily agree. We'll see. But I found like being a parent in tech, like so much of your time is kind of like micromanaged in terms. Okay, you got to pick it up at this time. You got to do with the kids. I have the added piece of my family's on the East Coast, right? So the weekend is all me, and
Right.
it's kind of has all be very structured. But I think what I find in tech is that, and it can still happen, but people aren't as micromanagey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that has been very helpful just in terms of like a lot of other aspects of my life. As being a parent. Maybe it's because I'm more A type, or just kind of more micromanaged to the T of like you have to get a certain amount of meals, and bedtime is at a certain time, bath and everything else, and to have a bit more of that kind of mental, space, and not have somebody kind of like breathing down my neck because I feel like there's just a bit more. Seems like there's a bit more trust. Maybe things are changing. Maybe things are changing in this kind of new
Right.
economy. But like in my experience, it seems like there was a bit more trust, more than I've had any other job. Where it's like, oh, if I don't see you, then you're not doing stuff. It doesn't seem like that. That's not really the culture within it, and that's definitely been something that's been a kind of nice juxtaposition between from my life as a parent, where like everything is kind of like very we have to be like super micromanaging on top of certain
Right.
things in order for us to just
And
survive.
there there also is, as weird as it sounds, like when you do have responsibilities that everyone understands, like you got to pick them up at school,
Yeah.
you've got to do these things, and people understand them. There's comfort in that, whereas I definitely fall under the other. When I was single and not married and just a bachelor, I found it harder to ask for, or make it not, just like leave in the middle of the day to do something, or take a vacation, or do something and kind of be offline. I
Hmm.
found it harder. I just did. And I always like ran back. We've talked about this. You kind of run back and you're like, all right, let me make up for the time lost. Part of that is like obviously growing up in the culture where it's all about work, but like having a child that you literally need to be attentive to gives you like that sort of, I don't know if leeway is the right word,
Yeah.
but there's just like would you agree? There's like a comfort that's like, all right, people need to understand. This is not I'm just go hire someone to do this. I actually have to do this as a parent.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think I agree there. I think that people kind of understand. Oh, that person's a parent. Like they got to go out and do certain things because there's like a human life that they're responsible for. But I would also say that and typically out here in the Bay, people have kids a little later, and I think
yes,
they're a bit more mature. They're a bit more kind of like you know. Um, kind of grounded in the version of themselves at that age, et cetera. And they're also just going to kind of be like, it just is what it is a little bit at this life stage, right? Like at
yes,
this life stage where I'm having kids, priorities change, and that's just something that I've kind of accepted. And so, I think you get the flexibility, but I think it's also you just know like, hey, this is a kind of a new life phase, and you know, I'm only going to be able to get a certain number of things done because I have other responsibilities, and
Right.
I'm
I mean, and it's not
opted for that.
forever, right? It's kind of, it's a
Well, I don't know about that. I think it might be.
no. I mean, it's not forever that you have to take him to school, but it's for a long time.
Yeah, no. That's
And,
true. That's true.
and the
I'm.
balance is, um, that's definitely a tough one. There's
Yeah.
no question. Would you say overall, like your experience pre-child and post,
Mhm.
is it harder to get things done now that you have more responsibility as a parent at
I
work?
don't know if it's harder. It's just like my day is longer relative to like how efficient I'd be able to be
Yeah,
if I didn't have, kind of drop off and pick up and dinner and all these other things. Like
right.
I can still get everything done, but I have to like mentally know that, my day's going to be a bit extended and, that just is what it is. Right. And that was like the case, even before kids to a certain extent that, you work in a place where it's like more intense and you're at an early stage company. So it's not like I haven't burned the midnight oil and know how to do that. But I think it's harder to get everything done during the workday,
Yeah. Well, let's
during like
let's
the
go into the
traditional workday.
cons.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's get
let's
into
go
the con.
into the cons.
We got to do the con. We got to do the con case too because I guess people are like, oh man,
Yeah,
it can't
this
be all that good.
no, no.
Having
I
kids.
mean,
So
I think there's a generally. I mean, we'll get to this in a minute, but I think there's generally a fear of like, oh, I can't get my work. It's going to be so hard. Like the stress
mhm.
level is going to be wild. I can't. I'm either going to fail as a parent or fail at my
Yeah.
job. There's definitely that undertone from a lot of my friends who have like reached out and be like, oh, I don't know, man, this sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
How is it really? Um, and I've definitely been, I remember telling you it is tough. The beginning
Yeah.
is really hard. Like
Yeah. It's hard.
I never sugarcoated it. I was like, it is hard because like you don't know what you're getting into as a parent until you do it.
Yep.
And then you do it and you realize, oh my goodness, if you don't have the help around you, and it's worse, like you don't have parents around and you don't have
Oh
the help
man.
around you, and you don't have, unlimited budget for like babysitting and daycare, it's really hard. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
have to sacrifice some sleep. You're gonna have to get used to that. Like if you're, you know, definitely get hooked on coffee. Um, and power through sort of that. That's probably the biggest con. Like that early for us, we did it without the help of any. My parents were a little too old; they were far away at the time.
Yeah.
My wife's parents, they helped a little bit, but not a ton. Um, we did not do the daycare and nanny thing, so we kind of just kind of held it together ourselves.
I don't know how
And
you
it was
did that.
tough. It was
I don't
it
know how
was
you did
really
that.
hard. I mean, it was all my wife. I was not
Shout out.
helpful.
Shout out Tito's wife.
Shout out to Melissa just for
Shout
doing
out to Melissa.
everything. It was hard. It was hard though. Even just like when I look back on those times, it was tough because just the mental energy around it. And once you start lacking sleep, and there's
Mm-hmm.
no like, oh, it's okay, just get to Saturday and I'll sleep in. There was none of that. That I think that's the
Yeah.
hardest part.
The
That was
weekend.
the hardest part for me. Yeah,
The weekend piece is really tough because, like, to your point, man, we don't have any support on the weekends now. When the school weekends, really the real work begins. All
yeah,
the activities and having to be on, and because I was like born into the fire with just having twins. Like my wife and I, we never really got that opportunity to just have to have one kid and say, okay, well, you take, a few hours this day and that the other day. Like we can do that now, but it's a bigger burden for the other person.
right.
So I totally agree with that. And uh, that makes it tough. If you talk about like the con, right? On that time that you might be able to kind of like make things up on the week, especially if you're working at an earlier stage startup where it can be a bit more all encompassing.
Yeah,
You really, I mean, if you think you're already kind of not getting time off, and then you're really not getting time off because there's always like some need to get stuff done during the weekend, and so it's like
yes,
balancing those things. Um, yeah, man, I'm like thinking about back to traumas of past weekend traumas and certain things I gotta do, but yeah, that can be really tough. The always being on piece is definitely
yeah.
tough.
I mean, I would say if you are um, entering into like a true startup, like founder roll up your sleeves, work 24/7. Your spouse should not do that. Like, you should not
Yeah.
both be doing that.
Yeah.
You're
one
gonna
hundred
just,
percent.
you're gonna probably need to have one person take a little more of a load so you can concentrate on your job and still sort of have some semblance of accountability there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll be really hard. Like,
one hundred
truthfully,
percent.
I wouldn't do that. I highly
Yeah.
recommend you not have two people in a crazy startup mode, and then have a child. That sounds
Yeah.
like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. I'll even take it a level deeper than that, and say, what my wife and I, because like we're both working just like you, Melissa, and both of our careers are important, but when you're like, particularly when you're starting a new job, we found that it's hard for both people to go 100% the whole time. Like, there has to be a give
Yes.
and take. So relative to where I've been in certain jobs, or where my wife has been, in terms of either just starting or at one that's kind of like taking up more time, where she really needs to focus, et cetera, there's got to be that give and take. If you don't have that, the whole house of cards falls apart. Like, there has to be some understanding between the two that, hey, I may need to pull back just a little bit within at least during this time frame of this job, so that you can really excel in yours, and
Right.
and vice versa. And found that to be a really effective strategy, and just maintaining our sanity and respect. I feel like a lot of people who have kids, I feel like the days are, unless you, I mean, people can definitely make it work, but in Silicon Valley here, it's very expensive, and most people are coming from two-parent households, and so in order to make that work, and for the people to feel like they can still, have the careers and success that they want to achieve, there has to be that give and take, with your partner.
Yeah, 100%. There's no question. There's got to be some balance there. Maybe we'll jump into we had impact on work life balance, but I was going to say let's jump into the decline of the birth rate, especially in higher
Mm-hmm.
income nations,
Yeah.
right? Like, over I looked into this. I mean, obviously Silicon Valley alone, but in all higher income nations, the birth rate is declining. Um, I think Elon and some others have flat out said it's a crisis that people aren't having children, and this is an issue for all of humankind. But it's a combination of like what we just talked about, which is you have a job, you have a career, you're trying to grow, and the thought of I need to focus all my effort on my career, I can't distract myself from that, leads people to either not want kids or delay having kids or delay having relationships where a kid is even possible.
Yeah.
And this happens. um and I actually get it, I understand it, right? Like, I can completely empathize with everyone that's like, I can't, I literally, I'm whatever, too busy, too whatever, too comfortable. I haven't traveled, I haven't done it, I focused on my career my whole life. Now I'm not gonna shift from one thing to another. That's not me. So they don't have a kid, or they delay it, or they don't think about it, and that seems to be what's happening across the globe. And you're talking about like Japan, Korea, like cultures that
Mm-hmm.
are completely different, are all kind of coming to this conclusion that, hey, I'm going to pause or not have a child, for various different reasons, but ultimately it's happening that we're declining, and somewhere in the negative, meaning there's more deaths
Tim
than
Burse.
births,
Yeah.
which seems scary, and alarming. But what is your gut reaction when you hear that?
My gut reaction is like, in the microcosm of where we are. Like, I definitely can see, like, through my own friends and experience, that's the case. That people are either deciding to delay kids, or not have them all. And I think it's a combination of two things. One, I think that the pressure for our generation to have kids isn't as palpable as it was for prior generations. You have
Yes.
people, you have women who are in the workforce and have high powered careers, and they have been able to achieve things for, like, relative to their parents or grandparents, they would have never thought would be possible, and they want to focus on that, right? So, like, you just have a smaller pool, maybe even of some women who want to have kids because they finally have the choice to do that. You have other kind of uh, you know different types of familiar relationships where you have like LGBTQIA folks having kids now, and they're doing it at different times, and kind of thinking about partners in timeline to have kids in different ways. And so I think part of it's just a cultural thing of like, hey, there's not just one traditional way to live life and have kids and then get the house and then get the all those things were kind of like part of our Western notions of what it means to be successful, which I think are great actually in terms of opening up how people think about how people think about having kids. But then I think there's the other part, which is just the economic piece, which is it's more expensive now to have kids than ever before. You had my grandparents who, neither of them had a college on my mom's side, neither of them had a college education. One had, had maybe graduated high school, the other hadn't. And they were able to raise like a family of five and send a few of them to college and,
Yep.
weren't like scrapping at the bottom of the barrel now. And then you have people who have like even one kid and it's difficult. So I think just the nature of like costs, housing costs, education, et cetera, have just made it prohibitively expensive to have kids. And so I think that's the other piece that's happening
Yeah.
in these markets.
I also think about like this. Obviously, we always talk about tech here, but technology has hurt the motivation. I feel like because I think like back in the day. I mean, back in the day, a couple generations ago, it was like you have kids. That means you're going to have help around the farm, or help around your work, or help around
Mm-hmm.
doing things, raising money, or whatever it may be. Right? You're going to have help when you have kids. Now with technology, you've gotten really comfortable. You can do lots of things, and you don't necessarily need help. So now it feels like when you have a kid, it's just work. Like you're raising the kid. You're like it just like this shift has completely happened that the payoff isn't there. Right before it's like you have a bunch of kids, they're going to help you on the farm. They're going to help you when you're older. All those things now doesn't that narrative doesn't exist. Now it's much more like
Yeah.
why do I want to have a kid? And then people just talk about the negatives because it's easy. It's just an easy thing to do because you're comfortable. Now it's like, you live in a small whatever apartment, you're traveling all the time, you're on Instagram and TikTok and you're living your influencer life. How a kid is gonna sort of, cramp your style or whatever that may be seems to be like an issue. I don't really know if that's an issue. It's just like the way of life today, having a kid, the sort of motivation isn't there.
Yeah. I think
So
I think I think like with the ubiquity of like social media and people being able to kind of see other people's lives, and especially those that don't have kids, and traveling and doing all these different things, there has kind of created this kind of cultural phenomenon of not being as like as trying to like live vicariously through other people as well,
right.
and maybe kind of the being just being able to see a lot of different ways in which people live, and I think that's put some that's made people at least pause or think more about, okay, well, is this the life that I want to have? And I think that's, again, I think that's like a good thing about technology and about social and showing different ways that you can live and have happiness. But I think the other piece is you can get so locked into that as well that you're not thinking about like the long term benefits of having kids, which I think there are, which I do think they are a lot, especially as you get older, and
Yeah.
care being a factor, or just like kind of enjoying the journey, at least what I've enjoyed, a journey of parenthood, and what that can mean as a part of like a broader life experience. They can get kind of pushed out. So, it can go, I think it can go both ways.
Yeah. I mean, let me just first off say how much I love my kids before I just say what I don't. But
That's it. I hope that's implied in all this, but some people are
yeah,
watching
that's
us for the
implied. I
first
mean,
time. They're like, wait a minute.
obviously
Yeah.
love them, and I can't like having a kid makes you sort of on team kid. It's really hard for you to say, "Oh, don't like this. This is not it. This is terrible." But early on, it is like I was truthful with my friends that were like, "Hey," I'm like, "Hey, it's really hard. Like, it is really hard. You better. I mean, your current life as it stands is going to take a step back." And but what over my kids are now 7 and 10, and it's a very different part of it. But I can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel a little
Yeah,
more, and
nice,
it's like
nice.
as they get older and as I get older, there's also a like I don't know what tomorrow brings, and to have a family and people that obviously are connected in that way, that have been through it in that way. I can see where people say this is like the most meaningful thing. It's just hard to sort of like wrap your head around as a 20 something, 30 or early 30s until you've done it, right? Like
Yeah,
it's one of those things, like it's just hard to wrap your head around. And I still haven't done it. I'm just saying I see kind of like I see it differently than I did when my both my kids were in diapers and screaming and I was not sleeping. I was like, oh hell no, don't do this, right? Like there wasn't even a question.
yeah,
But now I'm kind of like, hey, as you get older, my father passed at the end of last year, and being there with him towards the end, like I, there I don't know. I kind of turned a corner on that because I'm thinking, that time, when you are older and you do need somebody to have somebody that loves you and carry on your legs. There is something to that. There
yeah,
is 100% something to that may be hard to wrap your head. Like you said, you can't see the vision. You can't see the forest from the trees at that age. You're frankly, too concerned about yourself and you, quote
yeah,
unquote, making it and doing your thing. Um, but that I mean that seems like it for me. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but at least I know that I've got a family, and I've got I've taken it this far, so to speak, and I can see
yeah,
the light. But I don't know what I can't say that for everybody. But for me, it's something like, hey man, maybe in 10, 20 years when the kids are older, and like who knows, maybe it is the most incredible experience in the world. It's at least it's on the table. I don't know what I would feel like without kids because I can't go there. I can't take that path now, right? Like
yeah,
I don't really know. Would I be incredibly lonely? Would I be incredibly like jealous of other people with kids? I have no idea, right? Like, but I can see sort of people getting to that. But what do you think it would take to fix this narrative of uh, I'm not doing the kids thing. I just don't. I just want to worry, travel, and have fun. I don't want to do work. How does this narrative change?
I think it changed. Like, I can't talk to a context outside of like kind of a U.S. context, but I think what it is here is there's just so expensive to live and even make ends meet, for yourself. Like even for
Right.
yourself and just a partner. A lot of people out here just have like, or have a partner and then a pet, and even that, even they, and then people just even seem overwhelmed by by that, and
Right.
to a certain extent sometimes. So, but I don't fault any of that. I just think you know Bay Area, we've been dealing with this for a while, but it's just it's hard to think about a future where everything is stable right now in terms of job opportunities and ways to make money and ways
Right.
to kind of stave off inflation, et cetera, that uh, you become almost comatose to think about the adding something onto that, which is like raising a life. So I think until we can kind of shrink the disparity, I think between people who have a lot of means and people who don't, and kind of pull up like the middle class. And I'm not trying to make a political point here. I'm just trying to make a point about like what's going to make more people, think they can have kids, with the economy, is just being able to afford it. I think it just comes down to that. And
Right.
if that can't happen, like then people are making a prudent decision by pushing that out. To be honest, right? Because that would cause a lot of strain on the system if all these people are still having kids, and not necessarily having the means to support them as
Right.
well. So
I was thinking about this theory, and feel free to tell me I'm an idiot. Baby boomer generation, where it was electricity was out, it was darker, more babies were made during that era. There was
mhm.
more time, um, so to speak, right? Like there was I think it was the depression, and then um, the era where people had more kids. I'm wondering if the reverse happens, where these robots come in, and we talked about it. What do you do with your
Hmm.
time when you have these robots that are helping do all the tasks and doing all the
Hey,
things? Hey,
yeah.
hey, hey! More kids might be born.
Mm.
Like maybe that is the thing you do. If you have robots helping doing tasks for you and helping you with your daily work life and home life, and maybe that means you'll have more time to raise kids. I don't know. I'm
I
just throwing that
think
out there.
I'll only thing I'll say to maybe push it, I would say yes, with the caveat of there being some type of universal basic income, because I don't think people are going to have necessarily that free time unless the cost of so many things have come down, and frankly just don't need as many workers, and we just need to kind of figure out this new world and what that looks like. So if we don't have that, I don't know. I think people just be more stressed out. It'll be more like strife. But if we do figure it out, and I hope I'm an optimist, so I look forward to a world where that's the case. Uh, more access for everyone. That people, hey, we got some more time to focus on this, and we can afford everything. That could happen. But yeah, it's interesting to posit that for sure.
Yeah, because this stuff is very cyclical in terms of you zoom out into the centuries, and you're thinking about in 500 years when they're reading back on this generation, it's going to be like a chapter about COVID, and then post COVID, there's going to be, I imagine, a few chapters about what happened with the economy and where it went. And then they're going to talk about the death rate and the birth rate, and what are the things that contributed to that. It'll be interesting to see how that ebbs and flows over the next couple of decades. I mean, knock on wood, we'll be around to see at least some of it, but that'll be
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, so I guess speaking of whether or not we'll be around and what's going to happen in the world and trends, et cetera, why don't we want to jump into some news, some
Yeah, do it. Why
headlines?
don't you kick it off? Give everybody a new intro.
All right. So new intro time. So, OpenAI CFO says that 75% of their revenues come from paying users. And wow, this is pretty incredible. Like at some of the gaming and subscription-based businesses TW and I have been at, typically you'll see kind of paid users or users who are spending some type of money on the platform be like between 1% and 3%. But OpenAI, it's looking like it's like 5 to 6%, which is pretty wild. And just as a means of introduction again, I'm Justin. I've had about 15 plus years in the tech space, spanning the entire marketing stack and different companies, from founding my own to working at startups to working at companies like Microsoft, Twitch, and Discord. But interestingly, don't have a technical background. My background is social anthropology in undergrad, and TW and I were just two non-technical guys who spent our careers in tech, really trying to try to lower barrier of understanding about what's going on in the industry, as well as talk about the latest news trends and just bring in insights that make it practical and easy, that would have been helpful for us if we had come into the industry for the first time. So with that, why don't we jump a little more into what's going on with OpenAI? So their CFO Sarah Fryer reported again, that 75% of the company's income was coming from individuals paying for its services, and OpenAI's paid ChatGPT plan, it comes in about $20 a month. So, and they've seen really impressive growth on the consumer side. Again, saying about 5 to 6% of their free users are converting into paid plans. Again, typically, this could be like 1 to 3%. Within an average. So this just shows kind of the product market fit and how well that business is doing. And so I think right now they have about 250 million weekly active users, and that's pretty incredible to see the continued growth. Now, what's the caveat and all that? Despite increasing revenue, OpenAI still faces pretty substantial challenges because it's very expensive to kind of run those businesses with the GPU requirements and all the funding that needs to be raised to kind of make sure that the models and stuff are working. So Fryer kind of ended by talking about OpenAI's commitment to developing AGI as a societal benefit and advocacy for kind of like a large scale data center build out within the US to hopefully bring down costs. But pretty incredible to see that, relative to .com era where, you just have a certain brand and you add a .com and it was worth a bunch of money, at least perceived worth. These companies are making revenue. These AI companies, whether you like them or not. And obviously, this is one of the ones that has been the most successful. But any thoughts on this news or number of paid
No,
users, or what do you think?
no, honestly, it caught me by surprise. I feel like that number. I don't know what your thought was. I think it was. I thought it was high because, like,
Yeah,
maybe it's because we do this and we talk about it all the time. But like, when I was just in New York. I met with my nephew. I'm like, how often do you use ChatGPT? It's a question I ask all the time. Like, do you ever use it? What occasions do you actually use it? Um, and a lot of times I hear, yeah, I tried it out when I heard about it, and I plugged some things in. I thought it was really cool, but I don't actually use it on a regular basis. I don't have a use case that I always go to ChatGPT for, and a lot of times it was because it feels inauthentic. A lot of people are like, no, that's weird. For a student, I hear, I'll know the school won't allow it. I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get in trouble, so I don't use it. Or vice versa. I'm at work. I don't want to use it. It's gonna seem fake. I don't want to get fired. I don't use it. So like the 5 to 6% surprises me in that. What are the use cases is what I'm kind of curious about. Like
yeah.
that people are finding. I need to jump in here and spend $20 a month to extract a little more out of it. But what
I
are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's people like you and I, but who I think it's people like you and I, but they maybe I don't. I'm trying to think like maybe even those little or junior than us, where they can kind of use it more for the daily tasks than what we do. I mean, I use it every day, but like once I hit that limit where it says, "Oh, you have to switch to a new model," I'm not worried about that. But other people might say, "Hey, I want to get the best, most updated information, and it's $20 a month, and I spend that much money on buying snacks or this Netflix subscription, whatever, but I'm getting a lot more value from this." Yeah, it makes sense, and they just want to be what's on. Uh, they just want to be on the latest version, and it's not like prohibitively expensive. I think if they doubled the price, I think you'd see that rate cut in half. I think
Yeah.
you'd see like the paid amount cut in half.
Yeah, 20 is a
Um,
good 20 is a good number. It's a good like Netflix subscription
mhm.
with ads, essentially, right?
Yeah,
Like it seems like a nice barrier where it's not crazy. You can kind of justify it with business or you can make up for it otherwise, but I think you're right. If they get to 40, 50, $80, I think you'll see a lot more people or maybe you'll see that percentage drop to the
yeah.
1%, half percent number.
Here's the other thing that's interesting is I wonder if in that number, like some companies have like an education benefit, for example,
Yep.
and you can expense it, right? So some people may be using that as part of their education benefit, and they're
Yeah,
just saying,
that's a good
"Hey,
point.
it's really kind of a company's paying for it, but it's
Right.
being expensed." And
Right.
so I know a number of companies like allow for that. So that I don't wonder what percentage of that 5 to 6 are that, which would maybe push it a bit higher than it would have been
Yeah.
otherwise. Um,
Yeah, that I mean, either way, that's a big number.
yeah,
Really surprised. I've heard retention isn't great. I've heard conversion isn't great, but that number sounds very good. Like 5 6% converting into being paying.
yep,
When the benefit honestly isn't very clear to me, like why you would pay $20 when you could just jump in there and use it. Like, are people using it so much that they're getting pinged to get it? Or yeah, your use case of like, hey man, I just want the best. I don't know. I want the latest data. I'm asking
yeah.
questions where I need the latest data, so I'm just gonna pay. I don't know, but that's fascinating.
I think that part of it is also you and I are on top of this stuff every day, and we kind of have a sense of like the players that are out there, like and the other kind of chat interface type experience that you could use, the perplexities, the Claudes, et cetera. But even among people who we know well, like how many people are even using other models, right? So like if all that value is accruing to them right now, to the extent that these other companies, they're raising more money, they're able to do more marketing, and people are using just like different models, maybe you would see that conversion rate
Right.
decrease there as well. But I think until that, they've just done a great job at the marketing piece and delivering. Just got to give it to like delivering a better experience. I know you talked about the kind of retention and things like that down the line, but that notwithstanding, it seems like it's still you know worth yeah, kind of like worth spending the $20 a month.
Yeah, that's great. I'm assuming a lot of like smaller businesses and consulting businesses is where this, you know, is probably a no brainer, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
in the consulting business, and you're context switching constantly, and helping different clients with different tasks, it's probably really easy to spend the $20 and then have your prompts for all your clients. And yeah, I can see that, but the 5 to 6%, that's awesome. That's
I
amazing.
know, man. I think some other people, it may also be like a canary in the coal mine of like Google search and how consumers feel like I'm just not getting the best results when I do that. You know,
Yeah,
that the model pushes. I mean, they have the. I mean, we should spend a whole period about this about like the AI generated responses now and like how that's even
yeah,
probably suppressing some of the paid stuff. But you're still getting those paid responses, so people are looking at that. They're saying this is just like an antiquated way of doing searching. And obviously, ChatGPT, there's hallucinations, et cetera. But it is getting better over time. And this might be kind of like the next the form factor that we as consumers always wanted to get to, and we're willing to pay for that relative to not being able to get the right answer and also not having the same creative tools and everything else that it
yeah.
affords.
It could also be just fear and of not knowing. I want to stay up to date with everything, so I'm going to pay the $20. And
Yeah, I thought about paying. I'm assuming you don't pay. I've thought about it a few times. Pay.
yeah,
I haven't quite made the decision. But if they said you will not be able to use this unless you pay $20 a month, I would use it. A hundred
yeah,
percent.
same.
A
I
hundred
mean,
percent.
just to know what's happening in there and how it works, I would definitely do it.
And because of the time saving, I still feel. I mean, I think it's awesome that it's free, and I think it's awesome they have all these competitors. But if these competitors run out of money, which you need billions of dollars for the compute, if they do, and ChatGPT's like, all right, well, y'all had your fun. Now we're going to make you pay. Then it just is. It just is what it is at that point.
Yeah, the last one of the companies I advised for, it just get paid it for everybody. They just
Mm,
every person that works with them gets it because they just found it more beneficial for everybody to have access to it. And they
yeah.
just hey, run everything through this, um, and then here's your $20 a month. I- I'm assuming a lot of the companies will go that route at some point
Mm-hmm.
once they sort of get their own version, of, or maybe they just do that. They just create their own version for internal use, and then it sort of like filters it out. But that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Well, speaking of OpenAI, I mean, we can't close today without talking about the Apple Intelligence launch with iOS 18.1, right? So, for those, I think everyone generally is more or less aware of this Apple Intelligence update and kind of adding, giving Siri a bit of an upgrade and giving the overall AI capabilities a bit of an upgrade. But today was the official launch of 18.1 for iPad OS 18.1 and Mac OS Sequoia 15.1. And this was initially designed, I think Apple Intelligence was initially designed for the iPhone 16 series, but Apple Intelligence, they missed the initial iOS release. So today is like kind of the big day, the big unveil of the news of it actually being available. So right now, I think important to note, it's limited to the iPhone 15 Pro, the Pro Max, iPhone 15 Pro Max, and the iPhone 16. So if you don't have those, you won't have access to this update. And right now, I think it's restricted to availability in English. But what are some of the new features? Right, we got this update. Like, what can we expect? We got the new generative AI writing tools for proofreading, rewriting, and summarizing text. We got live transcriptions for phone calls and audio notes with summaries generated for easier review. We have photo app enhancements for organizing the memories, events, and trips. And then I think what people are most excited for, what I'm most excited for, is Siri improvements. I mean, Siri has needed some help for a long time, at least from my view, but now allowing for like type queries and a better understanding of like stuttered or interrupted speech, or basically just kind of the common way in which people kind of speak and interact. And I'm really, really excited about that. So, what are your thoughts on this release? Obviously, you'll do the update. I know I will as well, and we'll play around. But this is exciting news.
It is. I mean, I bought the 16 Pro, yeah, on launch day, and I felt a little duped that it wasn't included in there. If I'm
I
being
know.
honest, because like the ads and everything, it was all about Apple Intelligence, and you get the phone, it's like, yeah, it's not in there. Wait for an update, which whatever it is. It's here now. I'm excited to see how it's integrated. I don't use Siri. I've never used Siri because I just never had success
Mm.
with it. Just like I never used the. I always used the passcode. I didn't use the facial recognition. Call me old school, or maybe it's the slanted eyes for Asian people that they don't like. But whatever.
Oh man, you gonna get
It
us
works.
canceled in episode 28.
No,
That's the cancel word.
no,
That's
no. That's real. Like the slanted eye, it does not like Asian faces. Put it that way.
that's
The
interesting.
facial
Wow.
recognition, it takes so much longer
Mm.
than than others. So I always just put in a code. But we'll see. Well, Siri I haven't used as well either. And I just never got good reactions from it. For whatever reason, it felt awkward speaking to it.
Yeah.
But I haven't tried in a while, so maybe this will be a good excuse to jump in. I will say, Google. I tried a Pixel. I had a secondary phone as a Pixel,
Yeah.
and the AI stuff from Gemini was really nice. It was really well
Mm.
integrated. It did a lot of stuff that I thought was really impressive. I think we talked about it in the past, but I loved when the AI would take over when you get a call from an unknown
Yeah.
number.
Yeah. 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 You were
It would
telling me about
answer it.
that.
It would answer it. It'd give you prompts, and you could sort of respond, ask who it is, take ask them what they're calling for, take some notes, tell them you'll call them back, or you
Yep.
can pick it up. And I just found that to be incredible because I do get a lot of spam calls, as everybody else does, and if they're going to add that to the mix, which I imagine they will, that's going to be a game changer
Yeah, man.
for
I think what I'm most interested in is like you have the vast majority of people still who haven't really tried any of these tools. Maybe they've heard about it. I think most people kind of heard about it by now, but haven't tried
yeah,
it. But now with the integration with the Apple with this form factor, like more people actually like got
yes,
to see the magic of it. That's
yes,
pretty cool because I wonder how quickly that accelerates the progress of all these other platforms and systems. Just more people being like conversant and understand the power of kind of an AI co-pilot.
yep,
And now it's going to be now it's going to be the hands of most people. So
yeah.
that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Like breaking into the everyday use of an app is incredibly difficult, and
Mm-hmm.
I think ChatGPT had to have some kind of integration with Apple, and because it's difficult. Like people are stuck in their ways. They're gonna go on
Yep.
Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and they may not go to ChatGPT every day.
Yep.
Where this is now like fully integrated into their phone, and they can sort of utilize it where they see fit. And it's I guess the Apple Intelligence piece stays within your device. It doesn't go
Yep.
anywhere for that. And then they prompt you if they're going to send it off to Chat GPT. So that'll be interesting. I'm really curious to see how this goes, and we'll report back, and we can maybe take some notes on what we're seeing and what we're
Yeah.
experiencing. And
Definitely want to see how my pops responds to all this. That's good. He's like not very technically savvy person, so if he starts using it, etc. I like seeing the people who are just not really in the space, not playing with the tools all the time. Because if they kind
not
of
as
get it, understand the
curious.
magic, then
Yes.
then I think there's something really there.
Yeah, same. That's always my litmus test too. Like just using the Chat GPT, like people who I know from around the way that aren't in tech that are just like in other fields. I always am curious like how they're utilizing some of these
Mm-hmm.
tools and what I always ask, hey, what does your home screen look like? What are the apps you're using just to get an understanding so I'm not in my bubble of tech all
Yep.
the time. And that's kind of like I definitely noticed a lot more people saying, hey, TikTok, back in the day, there was a while where everyone was trying Snapchat, and then it
Mm-hmm.
was TikTok, and I was like, all right, I'm seeing a trend here. Um, so that's a great way for us as tech people not to over sort of analyze what we're into versus what everyone else is
Mm-hmm.
into.
Yep.
But
The true like, is it something that can really be adopted by consumers in the same way, like all consumers
yeah,
in the same way, as opposed to like an audience that just enjoys playing around with new technology.
yeah, there's like a bubble, and then like there's mass appeal, and to try to understand like what breaks through is always fun. And then the last thing we had on the agenda, I have a BART ad to share. We talked about last time people that are obviously don't live in the Bay. We're gonna put an ad on the subway. We were curious, like, hey, what would happen if we put a subscribe now to Rush Hour Podcast in there? So I was going to share that and sort of, just maybe we can walk through kind of our thought process, and we'll share with the audience how this thing is going to. We'll see how is this actually going to go.
I'm wondering if we could do a teaser on this. Speaking of kid stuff, I gotta,
All right,
I
real
gotta pick up
quick.
the kids. Yeah,
We'll just do real quick. Here's the ad, and maybe next time we'll get into how we got to this form factor, what our thought process was, and then we'll actually get into the data on how this thing's doing. Does that work?
yeah, that's perfect. But excited to have this out in the wild. Maybe have people kind of see it, make sure that the code works, and then
Yeah,
we'll go from there. It's definitely. I think that's going to be another fun thing that we do is kind of have some of these marketing experiment stuff and like talk about it live.
yeah, yeah. We talk it and we live it. So we'll test and we'll learn together as a community, and we'll share how this does. All right, you go pick up your kid. We'll talk soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, like and subscribe. In the next hour, Rush Hour Pod, we'll have more updates across the board. Talk to you soon.
It's been fun.